Hello, I'm Dr. Carl, and today I wanted to talk about a topic that mixes two of my favorite causes together. Generally speaking, I support right-of-center political causes and ideas such as limited government, free market economics, individual liberty, the importance of the Christian faith, the importance of marriage and the family, and the importance of national pride. But there are two causes I have that cut across the traditional right-left divide. One of them is my staunch support for the Euro-Atlantic community, especially the institutions of the Euro-Atlantic community, namely NATO, the European Union, and within the European Union, the Euro and the Schengen open border system. The other one I have is my strong support for the men's rights movement, because I am a firm believer in the notion of equality between men and women, but we will never have true equality until we acknowledge discrimination and things that are unfair to men, which society has been very reluctant to even admit, let alone address, which is a real shame because if society would ever just finally address these issues, we'd all be shocked to learn just how easy they would be to address. But at any rate, the topic today is about the idea of a single military for Europe, under most likely the auspices of the European Union. The horrible war in Ukraine caused by Russia's totally unprovoked and disgusting invasion of Ukraine has sort of kind of brought this issue back to the forefront a little bit. Back when what is now the European Union had 6 countries in the 1950s, there was an attempt to unite the military forces of those 6 countries. After all, one of the main reasons the European Union, or what was to become the European Union, was created was to make it so that the countries of Europe could never go to war against each other ever again. This is following the aftermath of World War II. And if they had a single military, well, it would be literally impossible. But in a sense, maybe it's just as well the effort in the 50s failed, because shortly after this initiative failed, France was involved in the colonial wars in Algeria, and this almost certainly would have caused the destruction of this, because no doubt the West Germans, Dutch, and Italians would have been highly resentful over having to fight France's colonial war if the single European military had gotten involved in Algeria. And if it hadn't, no doubt the French would have felt abandoned by the common European military. But flash forward to the present, there are no more colonial wars, though some countries in Europe still have possessions outside of Europe. France, for example, has Martinique and Reunion Island. The Netherlands has Aruba. At this point, there wouldn't be any colonial wars. If those areas had a referendum for independence, they would get their independence with no fighting whatsoever. So at this point, a common European military would be defending the countries of Europe themselves only and not getting involved in any aggressive conflicts. Aggressive, I mean proactively invading other areas. Right now, there are 21 countries in both the European Union and NATO. And at this point, I want to sort of address each of the countries that would possibly be a part of this. In this context, I think we can say 21 is going to be 23 soon, because Sweden and Finland are well on their way to joining NATO. And as a Swedish citizen, I'm very excited because I always wanted to see Sweden fully take part in the Euro-Atlantic community. I know I was extremely excited when Sweden became a member of the European Union when I was 17, and very disappointed when Sweden decided not to adopt the euro as a currency. So certainly these 23 countries could take part in a common European military, and we could probably add the non-EU countries of NATO as well. Certainly Norway, Iceland, Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro. After all, Albania, North Macedonia, and Montenegro are currently trying to join the European Union, and Iceland doesn't even have a military of its own. In the case of Britain, well, as we all know, Brexit was a fiasco. We all predicted that, now didn't we? So perhaps if this project were to get going, we could force a referendum in Britain on joining this, which would lead to, by extension, rejoining the European Union. Also, this could be offered to some of the other countries in Europe that are, as of now, neither NATO nor European Union. Examples would include certainly Ukraine, once the war ends. After all, if Ukraine had this in place with the rest of Europe, Russia would have never attacked. Georgia, another country I'm proud to have citizenship in. And also, I should mention the neutral members of the European Union. Besides, I mentioned Finland and Sweden. Certainly, Austria, Malta, and Ireland. Um, would this include Cyprus? Well, I also failed to mention one other member of NATO, Turkey. I guess theoretically, Turkey could be included in this, but the state of democracy in Turkey is not fully secure, at least not as much as we would like. Also, the Cyprus conflict would have to be resolved before Turkey could be included. Cyprus, however, could be, to ensure that certainly the remaining two-thirds of Cyprus would not be invaded through northern Cyprus. Another country to perhaps include, also trying to join the European Union, is Serbia. But in the case of Serbia, the situation vis-a-vis Kosovo would need to be resolved. Also, Bosnia could be brought in. I know many of you would think, well, Bosnia is very unstable, but remember, it's actually been over a quarter century since the war in Bosnia ended. So bringing in Bosnia would be feasible at this point. And one other country would be Moldova, especially if Ukraine is included. Well, then Moldova will be surrounded anyway. But there's also the issue of Transnistria. And I mentioned Georgia. Well, Georgia would also have the issue of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Again, it is long past time that solutions for these frozen conflicts be found. And I did my PhD dissertation on the Kosovo and Greater Albania issue, and I've written about some of these other issues like South Ossetia, and I'll do some videos about them later on. So in short, I have mentioned over 30 countries. These 30 countries could have a single military force under the auspices of certainly the European Union and NATO to defend the whole territory of Europe. After all, do we really need separate militaries for each country when a whole of Europe would be a much better solution? And here's how another advantage of this, and this is how it brings up the other cause I'm very passionate about, men's rights. One of the biggest examples of discrimination against men in the world are sexist military service obligations. I actually call it the glorified national sexist enslavement of young men. I understand throughout history, as Warren Farrell has pointed out, pretty much every society that ever survived did so off the backs of male disposability. And if we hadn't done that in the past, we may not even be here now. Again, that was in history. But the time has long come to move past this. One other country perhaps I should have mentioned was Switzerland, which is neither NATO nor EU. Switzerland, unfortunately, voted to keep this system 72%. I hasten to add that while older men, and probably men in general, voted to keep it, younger men, the only demographic actually affected by it in the here and now, voted to abolish it, while younger women voted to keep it. Well, if that's the case, then younger women should be forced to serve as well. But as many people pointed out, Switzerland at this point could go full Costa Rica and not even have a military. After all, they are completely surrounded by the European Union, the Eurozone, and together with Austria, completely surrounded by NATO, and they're even a part of Schengen themselves. So I don't know that Switzerland should definitely go full Costa Rica. They probably could. They face zero threat of foreign invasion militarily, especially considering that neither Hitler nor Napoleon invaded Switzerland. And if Switzerland were to take part in this, you wouldn't necessarily have to have military bases in Switzerland anymore. And Swiss citizens who'd want to serve in this could serve in a French, Italian, or German-speaking area, probably in one of those countries, Germany, France, Italy. So, in short, a common military for the European Union would further ensure that there never be another war between the countries of Europe. It would defend the countries of Europe from external threats, say from Russia or the Middle East or North Africa. And it would help bring about gender equality, as there would be no military service obligation. I remember I was living in Britain when the proposed constitution came up. It never passed. Instead, the Treaty of Lisbon took its place. And there were people in Britain warning that it was going to create a common European military. It didn't. And their argument was, okay, maybe not now, but 10 years from now, there could be a draft for the European military. Any treaty that would establish this must have an absolute, strict, under no circumstances, no draft policy. So, we could defend the whole of Europe more cost effectively with gender equality, and that is like a double win-win situation. I also hasten to add, I said defend the whole of Europe. I do think of Russia as Europe, but as of now, Of course, Russia could not be a part of a system like this. I dream of a day when Russia could become a fully democratic country and fully a part of the European Union, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, unfortunately. But hope springs eternal. I'm Dr. Carl. Enjoy.